Okay, shorter review session today, mainly because I got home late and I've been trying to fix my sleep, so I'm not trying to go to sleep too late. So it's probably be maybe around 20 minutes. Um, but yeah, turn on some music, just chill for a minute, and get to reviewing. So I didn't really come into like this review session with a plan. However, with the first one, we were mainly looking at trade ideas, trade entries, in order to be able to see whether or not we can classify something as low probability or high probability solely based off of the entry. But we realized that wasn't necessarily the case. We had a couple of trades to review here. But before we do that, I want to begin to look at higher time frame confluence. Now, this is probably something that will take a week maybe of like full in-depth reviewing to have full clarity to the point where it's actually applicable to my trading and can change it. Because when I do this, I really want to make sure I understand how and when my model has increased probability compared to low probability, rather than just saying, oh, price action's a little messy, it's a low probability day, or price action's trending, it's a high probability day. I want to understand the actual confluences behind what makes this higher time frame liquidity higher probability compared to X, Y, and Z. What makes this specific low I'm looking at SMT off of higher probability than the next low, or whatever the case is. Or having an approach to trading day, waking up, understanding whatever the case is. So we started off on the beginning of August yesterday. So that's kind of the area I want to stay in. Let me turn this down just a little. I want to stay in this like beginning area of August, at least for a bit, and just begin to look at the trade executions here. I won't look at July. I mean, it's really just started at the end of July, but we'll start by looking at August 1st. I really want to begin to check out what were the not only the confluences, but on the higher time frame images, what stood out that was able to showcase this would be a prominent, for example, like low to SMT off of, or a prominent high to SMT off of. Because for you guys that don't know, how I actually get a trade idea is through the hourly time frame. So I always start off on the hourly time frame, mark out our highs and lows. So for example, right now I would mark out our highs and lows and see what we can SMT off of. And once we do that, that's when I look for price action to displace toward there. So however, in order to reverse off of that, we also have to have significant internal liquidity we can look to take out. Let me go out of this full zoom mode. So if I were to just go on the NQ chart, and I'm doing this with a reason, by the way, I'm not doing it to like show you guys my model necessarily, but it will 100% aid in breaking stuff down, because just by me talking, saying it out loud, it allows me to, I don't know, like put puzzle pieces together. So working out the high and the low of the range. Of course, there's also this high up here. Then looking to see us displace toward one of these highs or lows before reversing off of it. So that's how I initially get a trade idea. If there is, not a significant enough draw to SMT off of, then that's when the probability can start getting lowered, but that doesn't fully necessarily mean to me it's fully low probability. And that's what I'm talking, because we can also inform internal liquidity, sweep SMT off of that. But that's what I'm talking about. I still have that lack of clarity on what genuinely makes something low probability. The thing is, I don't really know how to approach this. I'm trying to think. I'm not using AI or anything of the sort to like try to figure this out. I'm just trying to because we're trying to understand what's low probability. Okay. You know what? Let's reverse engineer it. Let's first start with understanding what's high probability. So we're gonna first start understanding what's specifically higher probability, and then we can work down from there. But I'm trying to think when I'm trading, what is the one confluence that I often allow times to leak causing low probability trades? I'm trying to think whether or not it's the SMT or the liquidity, because that's a huge thing. I guess that's a good question to ask. If we don't answer that tonight, we can 100% look into that tomorrow. That's the thing about reviewing too. You don't need to figure everything out in one session. You can space it out 100%. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's go full screen. So, questions. What pertaining, and this is, good exercise if you guys are really just want to sit down and get in flow state, just ask yourself these questions. That's why I record these videos, mainly because it gets my mind thinking. It helps me feel like I'm talking to another person. But ask yourself these questions, take time to allow your brain to actually do its thing and think. You'd be surprised how smart you really are. What pertaining to my model has been causing lower probability trades? Is it the liquidity we take out or the SMT? Why? Because I use change state of delivery, liquidity, SMT. I use those three things. So we clearly know it's not necessarily the entry. This, I would say, has a less of an effect. Obviously, we'll learn as we continue to refine. Who knows, we may figure out it has more of an effect. But these two, liquidity and SMT, those are the most prominent confluences before I get into a trade. This is literally my model right here. So if we know liquidity makes the trade idea, this is literally me just coming up with all of this on the spot. Liquidity makes the trade idea. The SMT is the confluence for reversal. What does this also mean? It also relates to timing. Holy cow, my brain is working. I kind of like this. You guys can literally see me thinking in real time. Okay, now I'm also starting to understand why my model works. The SMT confluence is the confluence of timing. It's not I utilize macro, micro, or whatever. This is what helps me narrow down the time and the precision. So the timing also equals precision on entry. That's why everything is paired together, but this would mean I need to see whether or not it's the timing that's I got it. Holy cow, it's another light bulb just went off in my mind. So this means that I need to see out of how many trading days do I get stopped out before taking a second trade that leads to a win. Why? Because if this number is larger than, I don't know what word I'm trying to say, but expected, we'll just call it expected, then that means we need to start looking into the timing of the SMTs, and then a little bit of liquidity or whatever we're SMT off. Of course, we got to look into everything, I know, but this would help us to give an area to start to work with. Because here's how I'm thinking about it. If I have 2 trades, right, and let's say happens to be that 90% of the time whenever I take 2 trades out of the trading day, one out of 2 of those trades often have improper timing. Not necessarily a wrong trade idea, but just improper timing, whether that be too quick, whatever the case is, too early or too late, whatever the case. Never really too late, but mainly too early. If the probability is more than 50%, then that can also be a confluence to, hey, the timing on my SMTs are also off. So that'll also give me an area to start to look at. So we're not just looking blindly at everything. We're not just looking at liquidity pool internal, which we will. We'll look at all of this, of course, eventually, but a place to start. It gives us, okay, hey, we can start to look at the area of SMTs and then begin to refine our SMTs, what we SMT off of, whatever the case is, and then that can also gradually increase my win rate and probability. Holy cow, that's cooking. But that's not it. That's not all, sorry. So, SMT's precision for entry, timing. So that's a huge thing to keep in mind. So if our timing is off, then we look at our SMTs, right? But now, if our draws on liquidity are off, this is also a different thing, because the liquidity paired with the SMT obviously is what, makes the timing. But the SMT is a confluence for when to execute. The liquidity is setting up for that trade idea in order for us to draw toward where we need to draw to. Like I said, makes the trade idea. So I'm trying to think liquidity. And we also understand direction. Liquidity also makes the direction. But how can we break this down in a way to where we can look into it further, rather than just like, oh, we look at like internal and external, blah blah blah. I don't think that's enough, unless it is. I'm just overthinking it, because the SMT was very thorough when we broke it down. This, to me, it seems a little more gray. Direction. But then we have to ask the question, what classifies as prominent liquidity? Is that a good question? Or is that just kind of like a BS, just talking just to talk, just to sound smart? But now that I think about it, what does classify as like prominent liquidity? Equal highs, London highs, session highs and lows? That's a good question, actually. Maybe that wasn't too bad of a question. Liquidity. What actually classifies as prominent liquidity to draw toward? And reverse off of an okay question, I think. I don't know, maybe it's a good question. But I'm trying to see how we can do this. Like, how I broke down, like, so this means blah blah blah. We can analyze the amount of trades with the timing that's off. How can we do that with liquidity? Rather than, oh, bias was incorrect. That's not what I'm trying to get at. I'm not trying to get at like, oh, bias is incorrect. Very rarely my bias is incorrect. Like 8 out of 10 times I have proper direction of the market, but question is, how do we know what low or high to SMT off of it is higher confluence than the next? And I'm not talking just about like, oh, this is higher time frame liquidity off the hourly time frame. Like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. Because then that would mean internal liquidity on the lower time frames is insignificant, but that's not true, because we've seen that example in a multitude of our trades that I missed a lot of profit even this month and a little bit last month due to not catching those moves, even though they're still classified as high probability. This hurts my head. Okay, dang. Direction, liquidity. But you can't just, you can't, but there has to be a way you can understand what lower high is higher, more prominent than the next. I know what to do. I got it. In order to understand what high or low is more prominent than the next, we need to begin to look at the differences on higher time frame, comparing our lower probability trades, most likely losses taken, compared to our higher probability wins, and not simply focus on the, okay, I paused it actually here by accident, but I was talking a bit, but I was saying if we can compare the higher time frame images, the 15 and the hourly, based upon our higher time frame, or not higher time, higher probability trades that are marked, flagged, versus our lower probability trades, we may be able to see a constant reoccurrence on what we see going into the trading day, because it's mainly I found that it's mainly going into the trading day I'm able to understand whether or not I'll get a trade, or whether I won't, or whether or not the setup will be probable, or whether it won't. But the thing is, that doesn't mean I want to disqualify lower time frame internal liquidity. So this hurts my head. I'm thinking. You know what? It's fine. Right now, we'll start small. We have a good base. So even though it may feel stupid, like, oh, we didn't actually go and fully review, we're figuring out how to target the problem. It's because, like I said, I really want to fully understand this. I don't just want to skim through my journal and be like, oh, I learned something, and then just go back to making the same mistake. I want to permanently, like, get rid of this. What I mean, I want this, not this one. This will forever change my trading, but I have to approach it in the proper way. In order for it to do so, I have to ask the proper questions, because if I leave certain questions unanswered, those will come back in the future as problems. So I need full clarity. If I'm still asking questions pertaining to my model, that doesn't mean I have full clarity. That's true. So even though we didn't fully get a full breakdown, that's fine. I think this was more important. You guys can see the true and raw thinking process of me, how I'm like trying to actually I think this is more beneficial than any trade recap or whatever the case, even though this will probably only get like 20 views because all the other ones do. But this is what I think is very really powerful on how you approach the problems you're having and how you reverse engineer them and break them down in order to get the clarity you need. Sorry, my brain is so slow. I'm like making words sound fancier than they should sound. Okay, so tomorrow we'll begin to look into SMTs. Liquidity will take a little bit more time because I want to make sure I fully understand what I'm looking at for liquidity. I understand what I'm looking at with SMTs because we understand the timing, the precision of entry, and how to actually understand the statistic on our filtering for SMTs, right? But liquidity, it's still a little too broad for me. I need to break it down a little bit more. But yeah, that was today's review session. I'm exhausted. Yeah. See you guys in the next one.